This is an Omega SEAMASTER chronometer, sent in for service by a viewer of this channel. According to James, he's owned it for a couple of decades, but he's never had it serviced. Lately, it will only run for a few hours before coming to a stop. The case and bracelet are in well-loved condition, and I'll see if I can't do something about that as well. This is actually the first chronometer certified movement I'll have the pleasure of servicing. The COSC, which is the official Swiss Chronometer Testing Institute, only allows Swiss movements to carry the chronometer certification if it's accurate to within -4 to +6 seconds per day, along with other measured criteria. My challenge will be to ensure this level of accuracy is achieved across at least the 5 positions specified. The rotor is stamped Omega caliber 1109. This 21 joule 28,800 beat per hour movement is actually the ETA 2892A2. It features a quickset date, hacking seconds, and is hand windable. Omega used these movements until it was replaced by the 1120 in the mid to late 90s. Since the movement is running right now, I'll go ahead and establish a baseline, and doing so prior to beginning the service helps reveal any other potential issues that may need attention. So this actually isn't bad. The amplitude is low and the watch is losing significant time, but this is typical performance for a watch that hasn't been serviced in 20 or more years. There's a little bit of positional inconsistency, but it's not horrible. Also, I will point out I forgot to set the lift angle to the correct value of 51, but that wouldn't impact these readings that much. The movement will be removed from the back of the case. It's installed with a movement ring, which is secured to the inside of the case by 2 tabs. I depress the setting lever post, which allows me to pull out the stem. The case tabs are now removed. With the hands all in line, it's now safe to remove them with this Presto puller tool. The movement ring can be lifted away. The dial feet are secured by 2 eccentric studs. The heads of these studs slice into the feet. They are turned 180 degrees to release the dial. The dial is stored in a safe location. The dial washer and hour wheel are lifted off the center wheel. The stem is reinserted so I can later let down the remaining power of the main spring. This movement features a hack, so as you can see, the balance is stopped when the movement is in setting mode. I'm removing the 3 screws that secure the automatic winding bridge to the main plate. The automatic winding bridge with rotor attached is now removed. And the hacking lever seemed to jump out with it. Normally the lever simply rests over this little post on the plate. To let down the main spring, I can hold back a little click spring through this window while gently easing down the power using the crown. With the power let down, I can safely begin to disassemble the train of wheels. The balance is now removed. The pallet bridge is uninstalled. I'm not sure what these markings represent. The owner stated the watch has no service history, so I'm at a loss. Let me know what you think in the comments. The pallet fork is removed. The train wheel bridge is lifted away. The second wheel, third wheel, and escape wheel are removed. The barrel bridge is uninstalled. The ratchet drive wheel normally sits on a post on the bridge, but is left here resting on the barrel. The ratchet wheel is removed from the mainspring arbor. And now the mainspring barrel is removed. Finally, the intermediate wheel is now removed. Onto the dial side, I have to uninstall the calendar works and the keyless works. First, the minute train bridge is uninstalled. The minute wheel can now be lifted away. The setting wheel, date corrector intermediate setting wheel, and date corrector are now removed. The date indicator maintaining plate is removed. The intermediate date wheel is removed with the date jumper. The date ring maintaining plate is removed. And now the date ring can be lifted away and stored in a safe place. The date indicator drive wheel is removed. The cannon pinion drive wheel is removed, revealing some old oils and grime that will need to be dealt with. Onto the keyless works, the setting lever spring is uninstalled. It also serves as the yoke spring. And now the yoke can be removed. Next, the setting lever is removed. Again, this is the part that is pressed on from the reverse side to release the stem. Finally, the date corrector operating lever, stem, winding pinion, and sliding clutch are removed for cleaning. All major components are pre-cleaned by hand before they go into the cleaning machine. A tip of sharpened pegwood works really well to scrub the inner surfaces of the jewel holes. The mainspring is also removed for cleaning. These automatics use a white alloy mainspring that is designed to slip along the wall of the barrel, meaning there's no such thing as overwinding such a design. The braking grease specifically controls how much or how little the spring is allowed to slip. If the surface is too slick, the spring slips prematurely and the watch will have very little power reserve. Not enough, and the excessive friction will strain the automatic winding works and wear down the barrel over time. There is a small train of wheels on the underside of the barrel bridge that, among other things, allows winding rotation to the ratchet wheel from either the automatic works or manually from the crown. The intermediate ratchet wheel, intermediate crown wheel, and crown wheel are now removed, followed by the click spring. I am now separating the automatic bridge from the rotor. The train of wheels in the automatic bridge is driven by the continuous bidirectional rotation of the rotor, which translates to rotation of the output gear in only one direction. In other words, the clockwise and anti-clockwise rotation of the rotor are both converted to a clockwise rotation of the output gear. The auxiliary reverser just kind of dropped off its post here. Again, not sure what the R represents here. Reverser, perhaps? Now I'll remove the reverser, reversing wheel, the reduction wheel, and the intermediate reduction wheel. It is the reverser and the reverser wheel that have special internal components that allow bidirectional movement to be converted to a single direction. Beginning with the mainspring barrel, Kluber P125 automatic grease is applied carefully to the small slots along the wall of the barrel. I'm using a winder from a set I purchased online. These Chinese sets are notorious for wearing out, but these are the new and improved models that were designed specifically with a steel arbor. Mobius D5 lubricates the spring and hole where the arbor will rotate. Finally, the barrel lid is installed. D5 lubricates the posts on the underside of the barrel bridge. The crown wheel, intermediate crown wheel, and intermediate ratchet wheel are now lowered into position. This little click plate here holds everything in place. The click spring is sort of shimmied into position. There isn't an actual click component as the spring itself serves that purpose. The ratchet wheel driving wheel is now installed. Now the train of wheels can be put together, first with the intermediate wheel and the first wheel, which is actually the mainspring barrel. The ratchet wheel is placed on top of the barrel arbor. The train wheel bridge is gently placed on top of the barrel and intermediate wheel. I'm gripping the intermediate ratchet wheel so it doesn't fall off its post while the bridge is lowered down. The escape wheel and third wheel are situated. The second wheel arbor is lightly oiled with 9010 before it is lowered into place while avoiding transferring any oil onto the third wheel. The train wheel bridge is now installed, ensuring that all three pivots are seated by verifying the train moves freely before tightening it down. The bushing in the barrel bridge where the mainspring barrel arbor turns is oiled with D5. All train wheel pivots are lubricated with Mobius 9010. This is the sliding clutch and winding pinion. These receive a small amount of Molykote DX grease on the metal-to-metal sliding surfaces. The winding pinion and sliding clutch are lowered into position. Before inserting the stem, it too receives a small amount of DX grease. I add a bit of grease to the surface of the clutch where the yoke will ride, cleaning off any excess with Rodico. All the other posts within the keyless mechanism are oiled with a bit of D5 since they're considered high friction surfaces. The date corrector operating lever is installed first. Before installing the setting lever, I apply a little bit of DX grease to its contact points. The setting lever not only secures the stem, but also actuates the date corrector operating lever. The upper post on the lever, which is what the setting lever jumper will use to make mode selections, is also lubricated. The yoke is now installed, which is what controls the position of the sliding clutch along the stem. A bit of DX grease is applied to the tip of the yoke that slides against the setting lever. I'm now fitting the setting lever jumper, which also serves as the yoke spring. The spring end of the jumper is positioned against the tail of the yoke and then lubricated with some DX grease. On the setting lever end, the contact point receives a tiny bit of DX grease before it is then moved into position. Testing winding mode, then date corrector mode, then setting mode. The tips of the pallet fork jewels each receive a droplet of Mobius 941. The pallet fork and its bridge can now be installed. Since the pallet fork pivots are among the most delicate and easiest to break, it helps to apply very light pressure to the bridge while manipulating the fork until the pivot finds its hole. Since the bridge is prone to shifting, light pressure is applied as the screw is tightened to ensure the pivot remains within the jewel hole. I'm now manually winding the movement a bit to prepare for the installation of the balance. The balance is now installed. The Inca block shock spring is unlatched and hinged up so that the end stone and hole jewels can be removed for cleaning and oiling. In hindsight, I should have guarded the spring a bit as it swung back a little too quickly for my comfort. Off screen, I'm using an automatic oiler to place the precise amount of oil through the hole jewel onto the capstone as you've seen me do in other videos. The hole jewel setting with the capstone is lowered back onto the pivot, and the Inca block spring is then secured back into place. The same process is repeated for the shock-protected jewels on the other side of the balance staff. A touch of D5 lubricates the center wheel post. D5 also lubricates the posts making up the calendar works. Before installing the cannon pinion mounted center wheel, I apply a small amount of DX grease to the base of the pinion to lubricate the point of rotation. And now it can be lowered onto the center wheel post. The minute wheel is now installed. The setting gear, date corrector, intermediate gear, and date corrector are lowered into place. The date indicator ring can be placed on top of the movement. The small maintaining plate secures the indicator ring. The minute train bridge is installed. There's a small tab on the lower left that needs to be inserted into a hole in the plate. I'm now oiling the lower pivot of the date indicator drive wheel with Mobius D5. The drive wheel is now slid into position. The tip of the date jumper that slides against the teeth of the date indicator ring is lubricated with Molykote DX grease. The intermediate date wheel is fitted with the jumper plate before being installed onto the movement. The wheel needs to mesh with the teeth of the date drive wheel. And now the date indicator maintaining plate can be secured. Let's not forget about the hacking lever. The lower tip rests in the slot of the sliding clutch. On to the automatic bridge. The wheel posts are lubricated with D5. The intermediate reduction wheel, the reduction wheel, reversing wheel, and reverser are now installed. The reverser wheel wasn't oiled using traditional means. I followed the advice of a professional who suggested creating a dip lubricant made of 33 parts IPA to 1 part 9010. I left a link in the top right corner if you want to check out his channel. And now the automatic bridge is installed. These pivots are lubricated with Mobius D5. The auxiliary reverser is lowered onto its post. The assembly can now be fitted back onto the rotor. I very lightly oiled the bearings of the rotor with a little bit of Mobius 9010. The automatic works with the rotor now attached can be installed onto the movement. I gently wind the crown wheel, pressing lightly on the bridge to ensure the intermediate reduction wheel meshes with the ratchet driving wheel mounted under the barrel bridge. And finally, you can see how this wheel spins in only one direction, regardless of which way the rotor turns. The hour wheel is now installed. The dial is lowered into place, but before I did, I ensured the two eccentric screws were turned out to allow the dial feet to drop through the movement plate. And now those eccentric screws are turned 180 degrees to secure the dial to the movement. The movement ring is now installed. I will now spend some time on the case, first by pressing out the crystal as to not risk damaging it in the process. Now, there are some pretty deep scratches here, and I offered to the owner that I lightly polish the case. I wanted to be conservative about it as to not risk rounding over any of the edges by taking off too much material. The sides of the case have a light brushed finish that have a few scuffs and scratches as well. As for the bracelet, yeah, this looks like it's from a watch that has been well loved and always in the rotation for a couple decades. As with the case, I'll refinish it to the level that is considered satisfactory by the owner. The reverse side reveals the bracelet originally had a light brushed appearance to it as well. Here I'm using a firm polishing wheel with varying grits of polishing compound. Next, heat tape is applied to mask off the polished areas before I refinish the brushed sides with some Scotch-Brite scouring pads. For the bracelet, I clamp two strips of wood to use as a guide so the brushed marks run evenly down the length of the bracelet. Heat tape protects the Omega logo that I did not want to touch the scouring pad. The crystal is pressed back into the bezel. There are still some deeper scratches left over, but again I made a judgment call as to how much polishing should have been done. Before setting the hands, I must first trigger a date rollover so it's coordinated with the installation of the hands at 12. The hour hand is now installed. The minute hand is now installed. Finally, the sweep seconds hand is now installed. I left the movement in setting mode, meaning the hacking lever is lightly touching the balance so the movement is not currently running. The case is now placed over the movement. With the stem partially inserted, I now depress the post of the setting lever, which allows the stem to be pushed in the rest of the way. The stem is secured to the movement upon releasing the setting lever post. The two case tabs are now installed. A light coating of silicone gasket grease was applied to the seals of the stem and the case back. And finally, the job is finished up with the installation of the bracelet. I had let the watch run in for a couple of days before putting it on the Timegrapher and regulating it. With the movement case and everything buttoned up, I'll check it again. As mentioned earlier, this is a COSC certified chronometer. To earn such a certification, the movement needs to be Swiss made and be accurate to -4 to +6 seconds per day over some period of time in various positions and temperatures. That all being said, the spare room in my house where I like to play watchmaker is not a COSC test lab, but according to my Timegrapher at room temperature, this watch is running very well. So, while this watch wasn't a disaster needing a ton of repairs, I thought it would be interesting to feature a higher quality certified chronometer on the channel. I hope you found this video interesting and perhaps learned a thing or two today, and if not, I hope you at least found it enjoyable. Thanks for fixing watches with me today, and I'll see you in the next one.